So what would your best advice be? You're going to meet within just a few minutes, have 5 minutes with, aspiring journalists. What's your best advice to them?
My best advice is don't listen to me. Really, lots of people have tapes and they show it to all their mentors or professors or lots of news directors, and they get a lot of feedback and a lot of advice. And my first piece of advice to anybody before I ever critique their tape is, okay, listen to what I have to say, listen to what other people have to say, look for the themes, look for what people say that's in common. It's so subjective, and I say, you know what, someone's going to love your hair and someone's going to hate your hair, but don't go get a haircut right after somebody hates your hair. If you talk to 5 people and 5 people hate your hair, then maybe you should do something about your hair. So it really is so subjective. So get a bunch of critiques, get a bunch of advice, and listen for the themes that are in common. When a bunch of people start saying something, it's probably something you should start paying attention to.
What do you think these younger journalists bring to your newsroom that maybe the older journalists didn't?
Right. I mean, kind of the easy answer is, more knowledge of websites and social media and things like that. I mean, they're much more comfortable with that kind of thing than I think a lot of the older generation folks are. So, although it's funny, I've kind of introduced a couple of my younger ones to Twitter and things like that. But I mean, just the spirit and the energy and the enthusiasm that they bring, as well as kind of their web sense and everything, I think is extremely helpful.
What do they need to know that they maybe don't bring to your newsroom?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what I'm looking for. There are lots of people who you need to write well. I mean, number one, if you can't write, you're not going to get a job. But lots of people write well. What I look for, what I think is important, is a story finder as well as a storyteller. For a long time at my station under other leadership, we, copied stories out of the paper or off the wires or from press releases. That's not really kind of the story that I think anybody wants. I always say if it's in the paper, it's already 24 hours old. So I want someone who can go out and do the story that the paper's going to copy off of, not us copy off of the paper. You're not going to go anywhere and break a big story on day one. But, if there's anybody who can show a track record of stories that they've been able to enterprise or develop or dig up, boy, that person, to me, would shoot right to the top of the list. Story finding as well as storytelling.
So when you get a young journalist in the newsroom, maybe who isn't that good at story finding, how do you teach them to do that?
Right. We are in the process of developing a beat system, but I've worked at stations where there hasn't been a beat system, and I just kind of made my own beats. I am going to be. I used to be a reporter in the market where I'm a news director now. I said I'm going to be City Hall for Lansing, East Lansing, and Meridian Township, and I'm going to do education. Those were my things. If there was a big GM auto story, the other guy did it. So just because there isn't a formal beat system doesn't mean you can't create one for yourself. It's all about relationships. When you have a beat or an area of expertise, you get to know the subject really well, you get to know the sources really well, and when they get to trust you, they start maybe giving you stories that they wouldn't just tell somebody that they didn't already know.
And you're right, a lot of it is about building that trust. So if you're young and just starting out and you're maybe not quite as secure as you're going to be, how do you build trust?
Yeah. Like I said, it's all about the relationship. When I was a reporter in Lansing, I worked weekends. So my first day of the week was a Wednesday. So I spent Monday with the mayor of Lansing, just kind of knocked on the door, and it was a small enough town that I went in. I spent Tuesday with the communications person and the city manager in East Lansing and the public relations staff at Michigan State University. And, I mean, not only did that help start the good relationship, they were really impressed that a guy who technically hadn't even started working yet was already knocking at their door. And those relationships help me even today. So, I was, young, 24, 25, and those people were a generation older than I was, but that stuff doesn't really matter as much. You're there as a professional, you're a working reporter, you have your needs, they understand them, they have their needs because it helps them to know you. So I would just say go out there and start meeting people, hand out those business cards and build the relationships.
A lot of people report via social media. They're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're looking for stories. That's great. Mm-hmm. Is it sufficient?
No. I have my own Twitter account. I don't tweet much, but I follow a whole bunch of people. And I get couple story ideas a day usually from Twitter, but that's just the beginning. That's the first step. There's so much more to it than that, because you can only say so much with 140 characters and a link, or you can only say so much in a Facebook post. So it's a great resource. It's a great place to look for ideas, but really there's so much more to it. Once you've got the idea, you need to get other sources and flesh out your story and do the interviews and develop it a little more. So it's a tool, just like anything else, but it's not the end-all be-all.
We used to think that the phone was a good way to report, but it too is just a tool.
Absolutely.
That really, I guess what I'm after isn't human contact face-to-face, isn't that the most important way to cover stories?
There's really nothing like it. And when you talk about having relationships and building trust, you can have a relationship with your, Facebook friend or your buddy that you tweet with, but really, when it comes down to, are they going to tell you some information they're not going to tell anybody else? I don't know. If they don't know you personally and you're just their tweeting buddy, probably not. If they know you and trust you and they know that you're passionate about education, if you're the education person, and they know that you get it because you've been covering education for a while and can tell the story correctly and properly and in the right context, then maybe they'll give you that information.